calculating predetermined overhead allocation rate and then actually allocating that overhead. Roscoe Company estimates the company will incur $80,750 in overhead costs and 4,750 direct labor hours during the year. Actual direct labor hours were 4,600. Calculate the predetermined overhead allocation rate using direct labor hours as the allocation base, and prepare the journal entry for the allocation of overhead. And so we're going to start out by determining the predetermined overhead allocation rate. And so just in words, how do we calculate that? And that's the total estimated overhead cost divided by the total estimated quantity of the overhead allocation base. So in our case, the total estimated overhead cost, this is happening before the period actually begins. So that's why it's estimated overhead costs. And so it's giving us $80,750, and the total estimated quantity of the base, which they told us the base was direct labor hours, so the base is 4,750. And again, they gave us direct labor hours, but this predetermined overhead allocation rate gets calculated before the period begins. So right now, actual labor hours is not relevant. And so down here, we'll say that our predetermined overhead allocation rate is equal to 80,750 divided by 4,750, which is our estimated overhead our estimated overhead costs divided by our total estimated quantity of the base. In this case, that's direct labor hours. And so we get $17 per direct labor hour. And so what exactly does this mean? This means that for every $1 of direct labor that we assign to a job, we also need to assign $17 of overhead. And so sometimes students get this confused, like if it's a percentage rather than the dollar amount, because they think it can't be more than 100%, but it can. That just means it's, for example, if it were 150%, that would mean that whatever our base was, if we allocate $1, we need to allocate $1.50 to overhead because it's 150%. In this case, it's 17 per direct labor hour. So for every direct labor hour, we will assign $17 to overhead. And so allocating manufacturing overhead costs, as far as words go, that would be our predetermined overhead allocation rate times the actual quantity of the allocation base. And so in this case, we know that our predetermined overhead rate is 17, calculated above. The actual quantity was 4,600. And so if we multiply those together, we get 78,200. And so now that we have that information, we can do our actual journal entry for the allocation of overhead. It's going to be a debit to the WIP inventory and a credit to manufacturing overhead. For that 78,200.